And that's pretty much it. We can now go in and we can say the top left is going to be Jonathan, so that's 0. And just to make it easier to see, set this to 1, 2. So now when we press save current and then press play, you can see that they actually update and populate all that information in there for us. So hey everyone, welcome back to another video. So in this one we're going to cover a topic which I don't think very many people know about, and that is how we can bring in JSON data from an online server into our project and update information almost in real time. So in this example, there will be a 5-minute delay between changing the information on the server and then having it update in Unreal Engine. But other than that, the entire process is free, including the plugins and the hosting. So that's something we're going to look at in this session. And before we get started, the first thing we need to do is actually open up Unreal Engine or Epic Launcher and go to the marketplace. So in here, we're actually going to use a plugin called Varest. So Varest, if I can spell it properly. There it is. And you can see here, I've already got it, but it's free. And all we're going to do is make sure that we've got that downloaded. So when you open it, and once you've downloaded it, you should be given the option to install to engine. I already have it installed in 4.26. I'm not currently using 4.27 at the minute. No particular reason, just don't have it. But as you can see, it's not actually functioning with 4.27 yet. So this works from 4.11 to 4.26. Now imagine if you recompile it from source, you might be able to work with it. And there is a link to this plugin's GitHub in the description below. So once you're going to hit install, you see it's only given the option for 4.25. I've already got it installed for 4.26. So I'm going to leave it from there. The next thing we're going to do is jump over to our library. And you see I've already got a demo project I've already set up. But what we're going to do here is just launch a new 4.26 project. Awesome. So same thing goes as normal. We just need to create a new project. If you already have a project set up, you can just actually open that one and it'll be fine. But for this example, I'm going to use the first person template just because it's a little bit easier, especially for doing a tutorial. And then we can actually go down to find first person tutorial first. And then we hit next. I'm just going to do blueprints, maximum quality, disable everything else. Yeah, we'll keep it as normal. And then I'm just going to make a new folder. So I think I already actually have a JSON tutorial folder. So we'll do GTXR. JSON vid tut. Not exactly the best folder name, but we know what it is. JSON tut. And then if we create project, what I'll do is I'll move the window over slightly to the left so you can see it. But in the bottom right hand corner, what you should be able to see is a setting that says manage plugins. So I don't know if this is going to attach. Nope, it's attached to the bottom screen. So if I disable my video quickly, you can see it there just in the bottom right. And then all we're going to do is hit manage plugins. And then we could scroll down, but it's just easier to search Varest. And we're going to enable this. Once you've done that, it will just ask you to restart the project. We'll just hit restart. And with that all done, we're pretty much ready to go and working with our JSON files. So to do that, you're going to use a website called JSONEditorOnline.org. It's free and it essentially works as an online IDE, so integrated development environment, but specifically for JSON. So it'll tell us if we got any mistakes. For example, if we move this, go on, we'll see that we get an error and it's telling us what it's for. So this is an example that I've wrote previously for the blog post tutorial, which will be linked down in the description as well. But it's important to note that I won't be going full in depth on a JSON tutorial. This is just a brief cover. Okay, so before we start actually writing some JSON, it's pretty good to go over what JSON actually is. And JSON is a JavaScript object notation, which is an open file format and data interchange format that uses human readable text to both store and transmit data objects consisting of attribute value pairs and arrays. So basically it's a list of information that a human can read. As you can see here, we can read what's on the screen. and a computer can also read that. It's, from what I understand, it's normally used for web development and server communication. So it's designed for things like e-commerce stores or websites which just need a variety of information that needs to be updated regularly. But overall, it's basically just a list of information that both a human and a machine can read. And that's essentially what we're going to do. We're going to use this to write our own JSON file format, and then we're actually going to tell Unreal to look at a website and then pull this information from it and then read that out with inside Unreal Engine. So hopefully that makes sense. As we start writing some of this out, it should make a little bit more sense. But rather than going on forever, it's probably best if we just take a dive in and start looking at what this information is. So if we take a look at this, we have essentially a section called user info. This is going to be what we use. In Unreal, we're going to say, look for user info, and then we'll look for arrays inside of it. So you can see here, we have our square bracket. Anything inside a square bracket, so we have one here and one at the end here, is classed as an array. So any information in here can be made into an array. So if you ever read a JSON file, look out for the square brackets. That'll help you identify what is essentially the information you need. And then inside, you can see we've got our user ID, our first name, surname, a player description, max gold, and a team. I just added these in so we have a variety of information that we can look from and pull the information directly from. Don't worry, we'll actually write this out again and we'll go over it. But some of the things that are important to note is any string or text value is surrounded by quotation marks, followed by a colon. These are what we call objects, and it's essentially a key followed by a value, so a key value. So our key is user ID, followed by our value of 0. First name, and then our value. And it's important to note that we have 6 different types of information that we can actually store in a JSON file. Strings, which are text. We then have numbers, which are obviously numbers. They could be whole numbers or digits, so 0.1, 0.2, for example. Followed by booleans. We don't actually have any booleans in here, but we could do. And that is essentially just a true or a false value. We then have something called a null value. For example, if this user ID, this user 1, so Terry, doesn't actually have a team, we could put null in here. So we change this to null. And then it'll tell the file essentially that there is no information here, we don't need to use it. So that's just one way that we could use a null. And then the 5th is an array. So we've already looked at an array, so we've got it here, open brackets, and then end brackets. So anything inside of this is part of our array. And then finally, we're followed by our objects, which are these ones here. So our user ID followed by our key. And it's important to note that inside of JSON files, you can actually have nested arrays. So if we wanted to have another array inside of these arrays, we could do that. But that gets more complicated and we won't be covering that in this tutorial. But some of the stuff to cover on an extremely basic level is that we do need to start with open and close brackets, and then anytime we add some text or information or a string, we need to add our quotation marks followed by our colon, and then we can have the information we want followed by it. And at the end of any information inside of an array, followed by a comma, because we're essentially saying user ID equals 0, comma is going to be the end of that information, and then we're starting another section inside of an array. And you can see here that we actually don't have one on the last line. It's because we're not telling it that there's any more information afterwards. We're pretty much saying that's the end, and then our array has another comma, which then says we're starting a new array of information. So that's pretty much it for the basics of a JSON file. Let's actually close or remove all of this, and then we'll actually write a new one. So first thing I'm going to do is start with a open and close brackets, and then we're going to hit enter. And you can see here, if we just do the same thing, so we'll do user info, but we're going to do surrounded by quotes. We'll do user info, and we'll have our user info followed by a colon. And then we're actually going to say all of our users are going to be inside of arrays. So if we just had one lot of information, we could then just leave it as a string. But I want to do a square bracket, I'm going to hit enter. And that's essentially going to say that we have any information here will be an array. We're going to do a curly bracket. We'll hit enter. And now we can actually start adding in that information. So what we could do is, we'll do a couple of things, but we could do, so speech marks and then user ID. And then we'll do speech marks with our value followed by. You can see here that we actually have our information. But one thing I wanted to say is I won't actually be using the user ID for anything inside of Unreal Engine. The reason I'm putting this in here is so I know which slot of information belongs to which array. For example, you can see here I've got 4 different arrays, but the starting point in an array or code-based system is 0. So rather than starting at 1, 2, 3, and 4, you start at 0. So adding a user ID just helps you identify which information section you're going to be getting from. This is just something I find is a little bit more simple to understand, which is why I add the user ID. And then we can start adding information such as our first name. So first name, colon, and then if we make sure the colon is after information, then we can add our name. So Jonathan, and then go from there. So you can see as we go through it, we're just making sure that we're adding the necessary information. So it's all about the syntax and the order that it goes in. But other than that, you're pretty much good to go. So if we just keep going, so surname, and then we're going to make sure we end each line with a comma. So rather than go through and type all this in, I'm just going to copy and paste this slot over just because it saves you having to sit through and watch me do it. And you see that's messed up, so we'll just move that back a little bit. And you can see here that our array is actually on the same as our curly bracket. We don't need to worry about that, but we can move that down. And I'm just going to organize it like that so it's a little bit neater. And because we're adding another array, so you can see here, if I was to just copy and paste this now, and we put it underneath, and we say we've got another array, either way you'll see that we get a syntax error. And it says instead of curly brackets, we just need to make sure we have a comma at the end of our each array, and you can see that goes away. So now we can actually just copy and paste this as much as we'd like into our code, so we can have as many arrays as, and you'll see that our last one doesn't need it because we don't have another array. So that's pretty much it for this. So I'm just going to copy and paste that over and then add in all the different information. And the next step now is to actually host this online. And to do this, I actually use GitHub. It's really important to stress that GitHub has a caching system built into it. So when we update our information, we have to wait at least 5 minutes for the system to update on their end before that information is pushed to the web page. So if you're wanting something that updates extremely quick and rapidly, you might have to look for another solution. But for anybody working on a normal project, e-learning, ArcViz, VR, that type of thing, this should be a good enough system for you to use. What we'll do is we'll actually copy all of this now. So I'm going to copy this JSON code, and then we're going to open GitHub. You will need a GitHub account because we're going to make a repository. And once you're signed in, you just want to go to repositories new, and we're going to give this a name. I'm going to call this video or JSON video tutorial. And you can see here we've got the option to make it public or private. I'm just going to leave it public for now, not really too worried about it. So we're going to hit create repository. And now in here, we get the option to get started by creating a new file. This is what we're going to use. And what we do need to do is make sure we name this something relevant. So you can see I've got a couple of versions. And what you don't want to do is make these the same name. Otherwise, it'll get a bit confused. So I'm going to call this JSON video tut. And it's very important that we finish this line with .json. So we add .json. This will tell GitHub that we're going for a JSON format. And what we can do now is just paste in our code into this file. And now if we hit commit new file, you'll see that we get a new folder or a new file in our repository. And we can just click this and then we're going to use the raw. So you can't copy this link, which is what we'll do in a little bit, or we won't copy this one. You have to go to raw and it'll open this page. And then we can actually use this link at the top. So we copy this. We can use this to call this information from our server. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to jump over to our Unreal project. And I think what I'm going to do is set up some widgets that we can use to display this information. So I'm going to just do a new folder called Json widget, blueprint class, actor, BP underscore widget display. And then for our widget blueprint, I'm just going to call this widget blueprint underscore Json or character info. And now what we can do is we can add our new widget. So widget, and then if we select it, we want to do widget blueprint, character none, draw desired size. And that's pretty much it for this. We might need to actually scale it down. So I'm going to do that in the widget. I'm going to set that to 0.25 because I know these come in pretty large. I'll save, and now we can actually close that down. We could drag 4 into the scene, but we'll set up our widget first. So it's important to note that the code for the Varest system can actually be put into the level blueprint, the character, your game instance, your save file, your user widgets, or basically anywhere you have an event graph, you can actually use this plugin. So it's pretty versatile and it's pretty cool. But the first thing I'm going to do, just so we've got some information to display, is just drag in some text boxes. So this will be our first name, and then I'm just going to duplicate these so we got a couple. So pretty much all I'm doing here is just doing some subheadings. And if we add a background image, because we can use that Teams stuff, we can set this up. So we just need to change our font to be black, and then our background to be some kind of gray, just so we can see what we've got. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to make sure all of my widget anchors are centered, just because it's in a 3D widget. Makes it easier. And now, just to save some time, we're going to make sure that we've got everything sorted. So if we have a look at our widgets, we have our user ID. We're not using that yet. First name, surname, player description, max gold, and then team, we'll be using that in a second. So we've got essentially a heading for each section. Now what we need to do is add some text that we can write out. So I'm going to duplicate this once, and then I'm going to rename these at the actual top details panel, and then set to is variable so we can access these. So first name. Excellent. So now we actually have some values that we can modify and change. So if we drag in 4 of these into the world and we rotate them around, we'll actually have 4 lots of information we can work with. So we see when we press play, nothing happens, they don't update. And now if we jump over to our graph, we can actually start setting up our Varest subsystem. And the first thing we're going to do is actually search for Varest subsystem, because we need this before we can actually get any access to the necessary nodes. And I realized I should have kept the event construct. So when we press play, this will fire and then it'll update the entire thing. We're then going to drag off our Varest, and we're going to go construct, if I spell it properly, construct JSON object. And what this allows us to do is actually call our URL. So we do call URL. You can see now we actually have access to paste our web page in, and we've got our verb set to get. What we do need to do is set our target to our Varest subsystem. And now if we compile and save, you see we get an error. That's because we're missing our callback. But also we can now go to our raw GitHub page where we have our information and copy this URL. So just going to right click and then copy. And we'll paste this directly in here. And normally, if you're working with a delegate system, you can then right click and do custom event, but this won't work. It won't give you the necessary information that you need. See that we get an error. So what you want to do is actually drag off the callback system and then search custom event. And you'll see it actually creates a request input as well. So we'll do Json request, just so we keep everything organized. And now we can start pulling in that information that we're looking for. And we're going to do that by pulling off the request and searching get response by dragging off and get response object. And then now we can actually get our array field. So in our information here, we have our field, which is our user info, which contains an array. So it's our array field. It's the easiest way to think about it. So what we're going to do is we're going to copy this here, just so we don't have to type it all out, to user info, copy. And then we're going to search get array field. And what we can do is we can paste that array field in here. So we're saying look for user info. It's filled with arrays. So we're going to do a get, a copy. And then this is where our ID comes in place. So 0 will pull in the first link in the array, and then so forth and so forth. You could do a for each loop and then populate all the information out as you need it to. But for this one, we're just going to select which array we look at. We're then going to do as objects. So you see here it says Json as object. And what this does is it allows us to convert that information into individual fields. So we've got our arrays. And what we can do now is we can search get string field. So in our information, these are all strings. So we can actually use this. So we can say get our field string. So first name, and then that'll give us the information, Jonathan. So if we do a copy, and I'm just going to do this a couple of times. So if I move that to the other screen, and then we know that we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 different lots of information. So I'm just going to do that 5 times. And we'll do a print string for this one, just before we hook it up to our information. So we can test that we're actually getting our first name. So just copying that in there. So now if I hit compile and then we play, you'll see that we get Jonathan 4 times. And we get that 4 times because I've got 4 of the same actor in the scene with the array set to 0. We'll fix that in a little bit. So now we know that we're actually getting our information into this project. We can then go ahead and pack in the other sections. And you see that we've got our team as well. This is going to pull in a value for red. So what we can do now is actually use our sections to add this information to it. So first name, we find that one, we can drag off and do get set text. And we'll do set text. And I'm just going to duplicate this 4 times because we don't need it for our teams. And then we plug that in. And we'll do that for each one. So first name followed by surname, the description, max gold, and then we'll plug these in. So we're just changing the values. Nothing fancy. And I'm going to hook these up so they populate after each other. Set you on down. And for this last one, I'm going to do something super simple. We're just going to do equal string. And if it equals red, then we'll say it's going to be true. And we'll set our image background color. Get set color and opacity. So if it's true, we'll set it to red. And because we know we've only got 2 teams, the false channel will mean that they're blue. I'll do a lighter blue. Dark one's a bit difficult to read. And then we'll plug the image in there. So now what we can do is if we press compile and save, when we jump into the scene, all of these should load in with Jonathan's information. So we press play. See, it looks really awful, but we're pulling that information down. And then what we can do now is we can add a value to our get. So we can call this player ID, hit compile and save. And then in our blueprint, I'm just going to cast to it. So event begin play, we're going to cast to WB, so widget blueprint character info. We'll use our widget, so get user widget object as our actual object. And now we can set our player ID. So set player ID. And now we promote this one to a variable as well. We can now access this from our blueprint, make it public so we can see it. And that's pretty much it. We can now go in and we can say the top left is going to be Jonathan, so that's 0. And just to make it easier to see, set this to 1, 2. So now when we press save current and then press play, you can see that they actually update and populate all that information in there for us. So that's pretty much one way of actually being able to pull all that data in live. And if you do want to make modifications to it, it's just a matter of opening up your GitHub repo and then going to this little pencil in the top right where you can actually edit. So we can then name Jonathan to Jack, surname Brown, enter, I don't know, pizza, and watching movies. And we're going to change our gold to 16, and we'll change our team to blue. And then what we can do is we scroll down, you can hit commit changes. That'll actually push this update. And if you remember at the beginning or partway through, I said that there's a 5 minutes difference. If we go to raw file now, you'll see that it still says Jonathan. What you need to do is just wait roughly 5 minutes and then keep refreshing the page. And as soon as that's refreshed, the information will update in the project. This is just one of those restrictions for GitHub, since they have so many people pushing information to the website. It's just to stop it from being overloaded. So if we wait 5 minutes and then I'll come back, and then we'll be able to actually refresh and see this update in real time. Awesome, so it's now been 5 minutes. So if I refresh this, we should see it update. Excellent. And then we can actually just press play and we'll see that we have our new information in the scene, which is super cool. And it's a really useful way of keeping projects up to date. So a way that I actually used this recently was for a client project where their website had a load of information that needed to be always updated regularly. And then the VR application to follow the website needed to have information displayed as well from that. And it was just becoming quite time consuming being able to pull that data in, make the changes, and then push it back out. So we used this to essentially do that for us. And what that means is now on the Oculus Quest, when they turn the application on, because it's connected to Wi-Fi, since you need a Facebook account, it actually pulls all that information in live and then can update just when you launch the headset. If you did want to update this maybe every 5 minutes, so if they were in the application and then you want to have that information pulled in real time, what you could do is actually set up a timer within the graph. So once you have this information, you could then do a timer by function, I believe. So set timer by function name. So once you fire it, we get the JSON request. So JSON request, and because we don't know exactly when the 5 minutes will start, we can set this timer to 30 seconds. So once this goes, every 30 seconds, this is going to fire and then it would update your information. So that's just one way to have it cycled. So if it is a live platform and you want it to update when people are in the headset, not just when they start it, that's another way of doing that. So yeah, just to cover everything, we installed the Varest plugin from the Epic Store. Then we created a project. We used JSON Editor Online just to help us format our JSON file and our arrays to get them into the correct order. And then we used GitHub to pull that in. So in our GitHub, we have our repository, we have our video tutorial repository, and in there we have our .json file. Remember, it has to have .json on the end, and then you can edit and then host the changes, and you just need to use the raw file link from the top of the screen to then pull that information into Unreal Engine, where we then pretty much just have our system. So we could also take this and then plug it into our level blueprints or something like that. And something we won't be doing in this tutorial is actually posting information, but you could actually you can use this system to modify JSON data on a server. So let's say if you have a save file, which is a bit of a weird one, or more likely a settings file, you could then post and host this file online, which then other people pull down. So that's just something to know about with it. But that's pretty much it. And before I go, I want to say a big thank you to all of my patrons for actually making this possible, as well as help from the Discord being able to originally get this all set up and integrated. So thank you to everyone for that. And if you'd like to support videos like this or help me make more like that, then please head over to the Patreon. It'd be awesome. If not, then we have a Discord. I think we've just got over 700 people in there now. So if you need any help with Unreal Engine or anything along these lines of getting this sorted, then please head over there and ask some questions. But for now, that's pretty much it. Stay safe, and I'll see you next time. Bye.